Victor, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to be here again. It's my 9th participation at the Rakurs conferences.
By the way, it's interesting, I forgot to say, do you know what these flags on your badges means? It means that 9 conference, you will see.
Thank you very much.
То есть у каждого из вас на конференции, на бэджах есть флажки, и эти флажки означают, в каком количестве конференций вы все принимаете.
These flags mean what conferences you participated in. You can see that Gottfried has 9 flags on his badge. I have 15, of course.
Nevertheless, and I'm always amazed at the progress that is brought about by Rakurs. We meet very often. We meet at meetings in Geosibir, Novosibirsk, and we meet at the Intergeo and many other conferences, and of course at the Rakurs conferences. And as far as Rakurs conferences are concerned, we have become friends, international friends. This is very important in sometimes confused times that we live in this world. And I think it is my conviction in my life that the scientific community is always 10 years ahead of the political development. That has been so in the past, and it will be in the future. And again, my last slide today will be technology easy, but nevertheless, management of human resources is much more difficult. We all know that, and we are trying to overcome that. And what I would like to say, I admire Rakurs because, like I do other companies in the United States, for example, a good friend of mine is Jack Dangermond. And as far as Jack Dangermond is concerned, he has done a lot to ArcGIS and to the development of Esri. It's a company that is uninfluenced by the capitalist system of the world, and so it is with Rakurs. And I wish Rakurs success. In Europe sometimes our endeavors have been developments that have been created, but nevertheless we are sold out to global companies, and you have been able to be your own, and this is a great achievement. Thank you very much. Let me start. As someone who has been in contact with photogrammetric developments right now, and I'm old enough right now that I don't have to write my own dissertation anymore, so I'm dealing with matters that are more global in context and that give motivation why photogrammetry is important. And mapping the world. Who has been the first who was trying to do a map in the world? And if you go back to the records, the oldest gentleman was Ptolemy. He came from Greece, and in the years of 100 till 160 AD, he lived in Alexandria. And he made a first map of the world. This was on pergaments and so forth. It was not printed at that particular time, but it was a picture of the old world, and it was assembled right now by the Vatican and reprinted in the year of 1477. So this was what the old world looked like. And at that time, there was a great interest because there were seafaring nations. They said, now we have the capability of printing paper, so let us print a map. And in Germany right now, a gentleman by Hammer, Martellus Germanus, as they called him, right now he published a map in 1490. That was before Columbus had come here. And in the age of conquistadores, of course, the map has changed. There were new continents that are there. You can see Australia wasn't there, but nevertheless, here, Latin America was already discovered. And our question is, what did the ancient indigenous population do about mapping of their territories. And we have records that can be traced again right now, for example, in this area by the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan. This is a map that was printed in 1524, right after Cortes has come back to Europe. And this is a document that was done by the Aztecs. But nevertheless, not on paper, it was just reconstructed. And there was a great European interest of the explorers. I just happened to know of one of them. It was Alexander von Humboldt, who came from our country, who did a lot in order to climb Chimborazo and explore this particular area. He has been around here, so a lot has been done. Okay. As far as mapping is concerned, exploration did not serve a systematic way of getting maps. But nevertheless, the first ones that were trying to do maps were the people that needed some money and introduced taxation. So, of course, Emperor Joseph with the Austrian Emeritus right now, but they lost the war against Frederick II of Prussia, and they needed some money. So they introduced property taxation. And this simply meant if you want to register property in that particular case and collect taxes, then you need a mapping system. And this was done by very old means, by the plane table. And this is why, for example, starting in 1770, the Austrian Empire, which included now portions of Poland, of Czech Republic, and Hungary, and so forth, have a beautiful mapping system, 1 to 2,880 of all the parcels that you have there. So, and they included topography as well. And what was very nice is that at that particular time you could use these maps, and if there were changes, you can mark them with red, and you had an information system already. It was on graphic paper. So you can see the necessity of taxation started. What happened by the year of 1900? You can see the areas that were properly mapped at that particular time. And it's very little. For example, here in Mexico, there was nothing yet. Latin America was void. The rest of the world also, it just simply meant that this technology of surveying was inadequate. They could use a lot of labor forces in India and maybe parts of America for redistribution, and it was done in Europe. By 1930, there's an old map right now, what has been done in Latin America. You can see in Latin America, by 1930, Mexico was one of the leading nations to introduce mapping systems. And this was already done by newer technology, and so it was in Argentina. And the rest of the country only went by river surveys, which went in there. So I think these historical documents are quite as well. And it was quite clear that it needed photogrammetry in order to start the real mapping, topographic mapping of the world. And one of the inventors who made a war patent in 1915 was Max Casa. And Max Casa never was properly credited by the Zeiss company because the Zeiss company simply said it's a war patent, we don't observe it. And so anyway, Gasser then wrote a book in which he says he dedicates it to the university geodesists who, by recommendation of others, for oppression of others, for company interests, free from research motivation, live from salaries of the government. So, and but this technology, photogrammetric technology, was used. What you can see in World War I, it was used in German maps, superimposed where the French trenches were made, merely by superimposition of aerial photos, which could be seen on the maps. And everybody has done it, not only the Germans, but when you can see the British also did it on the Mesopotamian front, and these are examples of these. And so Casa, he went to Einstein, who at that time was a patent specialist in Bern at the patent court. And he certified that Casa's patent was really genuine. The mapping system, he had this first multiplex, basically. And in 1947 or 48, when his demands still were never accepted, then at that particular, he wrote again to Einstein, and Einstein simply answered, quoting Schiller, "Justice is a myth which only exists in the drama, and this is so all over the world as self-interest takes priority." I think that's an interesting story about the history of photogrammetry. But so you need government really to do something. And the best example is the mapping of Russia. What you see here in red is a Russian mapping which has taken places various scales, 1 to 42,000 is 210,000 on the Russian frontier, the borders that were there. The green was empty still. And then by 1932, because Lenin said it was important, then in that case, the added situation came in green in by 33, by 41 in red. And the major mapping progress in Russia has been done in the Soviet Union between 41 and 45. It was enormous effort that went on by Migaik, Tsnigaik, Nigaik, and so forth. And this is why Russia was perhaps the first territory which was completely mapped. And we know in other continents things went on, and we have the nice story that Otto von Gruber, who was a German scientist, was very in friendship with Wilhelm Schermerhorn, who later was pursued by the Gestapo and went to concentration camp, and afterwards he became in the resistance, and afterwards the first premier of the Netherlands. And his biggest contribution is to establish the ITC, in which it was, in the Western world anyway, the way to introduce mapping systems together with industry in the rest of the world as a contribution to the United Nations. Now, of course, you can see photogrammetry has been used during World War II. For example, landing sites. This was the American military mapping of the landing sites at the Normandy. And this is all the maps, how they look like. They were done by 3 powers at the same time. And this went on. For example, in this region, imagery was always more important than the existing maps. These are the original images that introduced the Cuban crisis, where you can see the Soviet mapping sites in 1962. Now we are gradually recovering from these things. And another example of how images can really change the world, this is a Soviet map that was produced 1 to 50,000 of the nuclear facilities in Israel. It was taken in 1963, but it's not contained in the Israeli maps that are publicly available. So this gives me reason and motivation why there are still people that should look into the situation, what is actually mapped in the world. And we have been doing that sort of thing together with the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has introduced a few years ago the situation in the International Steering Committee for Global Mapping for 1 to 1 million scale. And many, 166 countries, they agreed to participate. Now we have in those regions, you can see all these regions which are now contained. But 1 to 1 million is something for an atlas. It's not for the details that you need for resources. So therefore we said, the UN has started in the years of 1968, 74, 80, until 86, to do a survey of the topographic mapping of the world. And suddenly then they said it's not important. So when the UN had a new structure right now, UNGGIM, then immediately ISPRS said, well, we have to do something about it. We will voluntarily go ahead and try to do it. And the results which I present here are the results of that particular story. And they just simply prove that technologies such as photogrammetry are really very, very important in order to prove that. The UN normally does most of this by questionnaires. So we have issued questionnaires with 27 questions to sort of mark the infrastructure of the mapping system, and also the important questions were what has actually been mapped, how old are the maps. And these are the results, and they have been finalized by the New York in August, and the questions were national data coverage, age of the data available, of the data without restrictions, so that means not secret to the citizen, then sale of the data or free distribution, methodology of updating, orthophoto mapping as map substitute, then use of satellite imagery for updating, mapping operations in-house or by outsourcing, use of 3D products, national cadastral map coverage, and web distribution. And there were some more questions there. And so the major questions were, what is the coverage of the mapping? What is the age of the mapping? So we could not get the information from all the questionnaires because only 115 countries have answered. And in the world, there are 193 in the UN system, and there are some territories beyond. So where do you get the information otherwise? Then you have to go to companies that know their ways around. And one of them is an American-Russian company which is called EastView. And they will provide you maps of the Russian Federation, whatever scale you want. And they'll provide you maps of North Korea, they will provide you maps of Myanmar, wherever you want, India, and so forth. How they do it, it's their own business, but in this company, they even have a dependency in Moscow. So you see the cooperation between countries, it exists. And then the next thing is we should not ignore the modern situations and compare what is Google, Microsoft, what is Scanex, Yandex, and the navigation companies here in TomTom doing. And then the next is what are the military agencies doing? There's NATO, right? MGCP is a program of something like 30 nations for peacekeeping operations that work directly for the UN. So we have tried to put that together. What are the results? The global coverage, I think it's scale dependent. Scale dependent, okay. You can see the 250,000 scale is nearly complete nowadays. So the map, 250,000 is okay, but you don't recognize houses, you don't recognize roads on that. You have to go to better scale ranges. Now you can see the 50,000, we have nowadays 81% mapped, which is big, big progress. Now in the last, in 68, it was only 23%. So photogrammetry has done that. And then the coverage right now that you can say in the 25,000 is still progressing. So 50,000 is nowadays with 80% the global scale which is available. The only problem that we have is, of course, that the update rate. Because we still, and there is the graphics that shows you this is the progress in mapping. So, so photogrammetry has done well, it will do it in the future. And it depends on the resolution. If satellites can provide a better resolution with 25 centimeters right now, that's another situation. It's not that one technology alone can do it, but all of this, it has to be modeled to management. Now, these are there's a list of the 115 countries, and I'm glad to say that through international involvement of ISPRS, the Russian Federation has participated in that sort of thing. And ISPRS can do a lot through these, to solicit information which otherwise is not officially available. So what are the 25,000 data? You can very well say, in 1 to 25,000, the areas in green, they are properly managed. In the ones here right now in Algeria and Saudi Arabia, only maybe 25%. And so then here, 1 to 50,000, we are nearly complete. What is missing is, in 50,000, of course, a number of countries, also in Latin America, they're still in progress. And this is quite a change between the 50,000 data. It's all in graphics. And we have a complete report, and I brought 3 copies with me. So it's in my room. I forgot it today, right now. I should have presented it to you, but I can do that maybe in the afternoon or when I get back to or at some other occasions. And if there are 2 more, right now, we had distributed to the United Nations, this report. So it's there. And you can see 250,000, the world is mapped. You have here, except Antarctica, where you only have 9%, and Greenland, where you have only 45%. And this is the source of the data. What we got from the reports, what we got from Eastview, what we got. And these are the continents that you have there. So we are making progress. Characteristics, what are the problems? Map restrictions. In red, you see those countries where the government is doing all the mapping, but it's not available to the public. Of course, I can only analyze those questionnaires that have come from the countries. So the individual cannot get it, but in the Western world right now, all the maps are free. Here in the Western world right now, in the Americas, it's free of charge. In Europe, and even in China, the government charges for that. And some people say, well, it's too expensive for us. You cannot use the maps because it's too, we don't have the budget for it. Methods of map revision, there are many, many, and they're listed are here, for example, the situation, who is doing it traditionally, who is doing it by field surveys, who is doing it by aerial photography, who is doing it by satellite. And then the big issue is scientifically, at all these conferences say, we are interested in 3D products. But if you ask the government will tell you, no, we have no interest, particularly the United States. They say it's not for us, the government, because they say it's the issue for private industry. But if this field is to be developed, then the government should take an interest, and only few countries have such an interest. So another big issue is, what is National Mapping Agency's responsibility for cadastral mapping? And you can see in the Americas, it's not, so we don't get a push for cadastral mapping. It's not being done right. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And all of the countries have map agency funded by the government. And here we have tried the budget, but they didn't give us all but we can see that Japan, Britain, and Europe, they have the biggest budget per area that you can say, while the others have less budget per area. Who is doing web services? Okay, only a few. These are not. So archival national data sets on servers. So this global serving system is not there. Now, this is governmental input. And of course, this type of mapping is authoritative, it's reliable. And outside of that, private industry is doing a lot of efforts in order to do some mapping for their own purpose. Google does it for advertising. And so therefore, the accuracy is suffering. You can see only in those areas that are green, they use authoritative maps which they buy, and then in that case, the mapping standards are being more or less maintained. But still, when you go to other areas that are being updated, they use satellite images where you have only oblique sort of things. It may happen that you are 1 kilometer off in the accuracy. But what Google is doing, even though it's not allowed, is through private mapping effort, they have Google Street Map. These are the street map coverage for the update. We have seen that the maps on the average are about maybe 10 to 20 years old in the world. The only way to do that is by this new technology, for example, by Street Map. Outside of Google, there is, of course, Bing Maps. Bing Maps, this venture has now been sold to Uber. So we'll see whether they have the capital to pursue these plans, but for the major towns in US and Europe to do it, not for the rest of the world. Another interest is, of course, the navigational maps. Here is a company that was formerly NAVTEC, and they work in 196 countries. So car industry is very active in updating not the topography, but at least the roads. And so is TomTom. Okay. So we should not forget the military efforts that are working for the UN. Very secret, you don't get that. But they work in crisis areas. And in red is the plans where they would work for the crisis areas. It was very difficult to get the information, but nevertheless. There is, of course, between the private mapping, authoritative mapping, a great big difference. When you look at Google Maps, there's not very much on it, right? When you use authoritative mapping, this is what we are used to. You can make some planning on that. And there's another effort, which is OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap can be in certain regions more effective because the public is doing it. But if the public is doing it, who is checking it? We need authoritative maps. So if there is a way from here to there, or a way from here to there, then we will be successful. This points out to the situation that cooperation is absolutely necessary. And this is why I think it's an excellent idea that you have this round table. If you're interested in the round table, please join us and give us your opinions. There would be a lot of discussion there. One of the issues that is known to us since a lot of time, when you have cartographic information, you can merge it with imagery. The first ones who have done that was the Ekonomiska Kartan of Sweden. And this is an example of the year 1962. It's a photo map, basically. When the geometry, today we have the capability of doing it. We have even a better capability. We have Digital Globe, we have Playard, Terasa X, Spot, Tandem X, the radar, the DMC. So, and we even have within ESRI the capabilities for ArcGIS to include aerial photography. And they want to distribute it globally. And ESRI has the living atlas of the world. So when you have ArcGIS, you already can get data. How frequent that is going to be, who knows? But there's a lot of discussion that goes in there. So anyway, we have seen the progress has been made. We have, and the progress was significant. It would not have been possible without the use of photogrammetry. Photogrammetry includes all the sensor systems. It's not only aerial, it's satellite, it can be UAVs and everything. But we need, anyway, updating. So there become, technology is easy, management of humans is difficult. I hope we succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gottfried. As usually, very interesting presentation. И коллеги,
Dear colleagues, are there any questions? While you're
about questions, I would like to add a little bit to your presentation and to remind that the first remote sensing data were received by Russian spaceman, German Titov. It was in 1861, and I suppose and I think that it's a birthday of remote sensing from space. Коллеги, есть еще вопросы? Тогда у меня...
I have a question.
So I have a question to you, maybe even two questions. The first question is, how big is the team who prepared these results and who made this work to collect all the data?
It's very small. We had a lot of volunteers, but right now to coordinate them all, as far as that's concerned, it needs a lot of correspondence. We are in Hannover, we are 3 people.
Only 3.
Yeah. And then you have to go, of course. I went to Minneapolis. I go to a conference and I talk to people. Through the network of ISPRS, it is possible to talk to friends.
3 person, a lot of information, but it's interesting because actually the information is quite important and only 3 persons prepared it. And also you mentioned about answer of US government that they have not interest to 3D models. It's interesting also for me because I thought before that now it's also for discussion for round table, but I thought that maybe 3D modelization is the way that is interesting for everybody. What is your opinion?
Well, I mean, the scientific society simply say push the technology forward. I think the biggest handicap on the public sector is that if you do something, you need to maintain it. And there are 2 various. If the country is very rich, he can afford to map particularly in the Near East, this is happening. The countries map every 10 years and do it completely new. In Europe, we are used to the situation that we find means of updating these maps. I think Yandex is also thinking along these lines, but you need to install an updating program. The updating program is more expensive than the whole mapping program. And the ideal goal would be to have a map update every 3 years. And I think you cannot achieve that by governmental means alone if you're not hiking up the funding for the government. So industry needs to participate, and that's the way to do it. There need to be arrangement between government and between private industry, maybe mutual contracting to facilitate that. And our professional bodies should aim at that to bring the 2 bodies, government and industry together.
Thank you very much. It's a subject for discussions during round table. Еще у нас есть вопросы, коллеги?
Do we have any other questions? I would like to thank Gottfried one more time.